Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we will look into the Leetcode medium level problem called score of parenthesis. The problem statement says that we have given a balanced parenthesis string S as an input and we need to return the score of that string. The score of the balanced parenthesis string is based on the following rules. First rule is that empty parenthesis string has a score 1. AB has a score A plus B, where A and B are balanced parenthesis strings. A inside the parenthesis has a score 2 into A, where A is the balanced parenthesis string. Let's understand this in more detail with some examples. As mentioned in the problem statement, input string is a valid parenthesis string. So we don't need to worry about whether the string is valid or not. And it contains only opening and closing round bracket. To calculate the score for this input string, we need to keep three rules in mind. First rule is the score for empty parenthesis or pair of parentheses which does not have anything between them is 1. The second rule is the score for the string like this, which is a combination of two valid parenthesis strings A and B. The score for this overall string will be score of A, which is 1 based on the rule 1. And score for B is also 1. So it will be 1 plus 1 equal to 2. And the third rule is if there is a string which is inside the pair of parentheses, then the score gets double. So the score for this overall string will be whatever the score of inner string, or let's say A here, will be multiplied by 2. So 2 into 1 equal to 2. Let's understand with the example. Let's say we have given this valid parenthesis string as input. So in a first step, it can be represented like this. Why? Because the score of empty parenthesis, which is this inner empty parenthesis and this outside empty parenthesis, is 1. That is the rule 1. Next, the score of this 1, which is inside the pair of parentheses, will get double. So 2 into 1 equal to 2. So the score for this 1 inside this pair of parentheses is 2. Next, similar rule, the score of 2, which is inside the pair of parentheses, will be 2 into 2, 4. 2 into 2, 4. Then it can be represented like 1, 4. And then the final score will be 5 because 1 is a score of A, which is this one, valid parenthesis string, and 4 is a score of B, which is this valid parenthesis string. So 1 plus 4 equal to 5. So this is the final score for this input string. Now we understood the problem statement. Let's understand the approach. So let's say this is the input example given to us for which the score is 9. We'll understand how. So if you want to represent this overall string, it can be represented like this. So this is the empty parenthesis plus the rest of the string. Why empty parenthesis separately? Because this is the smallest unit for which we know the score, which is 1. Then we will divide this string also to the smallest unit. For example, this string can be, so this is the inner string, which is inside this pair of parentheses, outside parentheses. And then this internal string is also inside the pair of parentheses. And then this internal string is basically the combination of two valid parenthesis strings, which is empty parenthesis string, which is the smallest unit. So we can see this overall string also kind of layered like this. Then the score for the empty parenthesis string, we know it is 1, 1, 1. And for this, it is fine. For then, once we get the score for this empty parenthesis, we can get the score for this string, which is A plus B, right? Like AB. So it will be like 1 plus 1, 2. Now we got the score for this, and this string is inside the pair of parentheses. So according to the rule 3, it will be 2 into 2, which is 4. Now this string is also inside the pair of parentheses. So this score will also get double. So it is 4 into 2, 8. Now to get the score for overall string, it is the combination of this string and this string. The score for this string is 1 and score for this string we got is 8. So we came from the lowest, smallest unit, and then we came to the 8 score for this string. So 1 plus 8 is 9. So we got the overall score for this input string 9 by dividing that string into the valid substrings, which are valid parenthesis strings only, till the smallest unit, which is empty parenthesis. Let's understand in more detail. Let's say we start for parsing for this, right? So we need to keep track of open brackets, because open brackets is kind of a layering, right? We need to keep on visiting the open bracket till we hit the smallest unit, which is the empty parenthesis. So we start with this, we came to the closing bracket. So the previous character is open bracket only. So there is nothing in between. So this is the empty parenthesis. So we came to the empty parenthesis. So we can represent it as a 1. Then go to the next character, which is open bracket. As discussed, open brackets represents the layers. So keep track of those open brackets, like first open bracket, second open bracket, third open bracket. And when we see close bracket, it means that the previous we need to check. What is the previous? Previous is an open bracket. It means that we got the empty parenthesis or the smallest unit. So what is the value for that? 1. Go to the next character, which is open bracket. When we see open bracket, it means that another valid string is starting. So put it in a, or keep track of it. And then when we visit the closing bracket, check what is the previous character, which is basically the open bracket. It means that there is nothing in between. So it is again the empty parenthesis, for which the score is 1. But now when we hit the closing bracket, we check what was the previous thing. Previous thing is some score. It means that there are some strings inside this closing bracket and the opening bracket for that closing bracket. So what do we need to do? So we need to basically add all the scores here. If there are multiple valid strings here, which is 1 plus 1, 2. And because they are inside the pair of parentheses, that 2 will get doubled. So it will be 4. And remove this opening bracket, because for which we already visited the closing bracket. And similarly, when we hit this closing bracket, now the previous is a score. It means there is some valid strings in between this open bracket and this close bracket. So what we need to do? The score is 4. It will get doubled, because for every open bracket, the score gets double if there is something, some other string is there in those open bracket and close bracket. So 4 into 2 is 8. So it will be added. Now we completed the parsing and we got 1 and 8, which is this 1 and this is 8. So we need to just sum it up, which is 1 plus 8 is 9. So we got the final score. So we will use this approach. Basically, we keep on going, keep on visiting the open brackets till we hit the closing bracket, because open bracket represents the layer or start of the new string. And when we see the close bracket, we need to check whether it is empty parenthesis or not, whether we came to the smallest unit or not. And once we came, then backtrack to the previous open brackets, if any, right? So here we need to keep track of open brackets and score for the inner strings, because when we get the score for the inner strings, then only we can get the score for the outer strings, right? Till we see the closing bracket. Why till the closing bracket? Because when we see the closing bracket, it is kind of end of some valid parenthesis string, right? And when we calculate the score, let's say for this we calculated the score, and when we see the closing bracket, we need to backtrack to the open bracket for that closing bracket. And while doing that, we need to sum up the inner string scores so that we can get the overall score for that valid string. So you can see we need to keep track of open brackets till we see the closing bracket for the last open bracket, and we need to backtrack till previous open bracket to and sum up the inner string scores, right? So here it is kind of a last in first out. The last open bracket comes out first, and we need to backtrack also to the previous open brackets. Then which data structure is useful here? Which data structure gives us this capability? It is stack. So let's understand the solution using stack. So this is the example for which the score is 5. Now to keep track of open brackets, we can push 0 to stack. Like we can think of it as a marker which represents that this is an open bracket. So we can push 0 because the smallest score is 1. So we can safely use the 0. Now when we see the close bracket, then when we see the stack top 0, it means that the previous character was open bracket. So we found the empty parenthesis as we saw in the previous slide. So we just take the score 1 and push that to the stack. But when we see close bracket and when the stack top is not 0, let's say we see this closing bracket and stack top won't be 0 because there is some valid string in between the opening bracket for this closing bracket. So there will be some valid string. So what we need to do? So whatever the valid string is there inside that pair of parentheses, we need to add the scores if there are multiple strings. And whatever the score is there, we need to double it because they are inside the pair of parentheses. And whatever the score we get, we need to again push it to the stack. So after passing all the values, we need to basically add all the values of the stack, which basically represents the score for different strings of this overall string, like we understood in a previous slide. Let's understand in detail. Let's say we start passing, we push 0 for open bracket. Next is the close bracket. Now stack top is 0. It means that we hit the empty parenthesis, which is the smallest unit. Then we pushed 1 to the stack. And then we go to the next character, which is open bracket, which we push 0 to the stack, and we do same thing for each open bracket. And when we come to the close bracket, we see what is the previous character visited, which is 0. 0 means open bracket. So we got the empty parenthesis. So what is the value for an empty parenthesis? It is 1. So we push to the stack. Then we go to the next closing bracket. Now what is the top of the stack? Top of the stack is 1. It means for this closing bracket and the open bracket for this closing bracket, inside them there is some valid parenthesis string, and this is the score for that. So this score will sum up the scores till we hit the 0, which is the open bracket for this closing bracket. So value is 1, and when we see the 0, it means that we got the open bracket for this closed bracket, and whatever the value we see, which is the inner score between this closing bracket and opening bracket, we need to double it. So 1 into 2 is 2. We'll push that to the stack. Now when we go to the next character, which is again closing bracket, we'll follow the same process. Like sum of all the internal scores, which is 2, and when we see the opening bracket for this closing bracket, which is 0, we double that value. So basically we double the score of the inner string, which is 2 into 2 is 4. We remove that open bracket marker and push the 4 as a score to the stack. Now we completed the passing. Now you can see 1, which is the score for this string, and 4 is the score for this valid parenthesis string. This is the combination of that combination gives us the overall string. So we'll sum up all the values, which is 1 plus 4, which is 5. So we got the final answer 5 using stack. Let's understand the implementation using a stack. So we declared the stack here. We are parsing the string character by character, and for every open bracket we are pushing the 0 to stack. And whenever we see the closing bracket, it will go to the else. It will pop all the values till the open bracket for this closing bracket. Now stack.peak is 0. So it will not go into this while condition because the previous character itself is an open bracket. So it means we got the empty parenthesis, and value is a 0. Right? Value 0 means we are seeing the empty parenthesis. There is nothing inside, so value is 0, which is empty parenthesis. So push 1, remove 0, stack.pop, which is the open bracket, and push the 1. Then we go to the next open bracket. It will go to the if condition and push the 0 to the stack. It will do same for next open brackets. And whenever we see the closing bracket, it will go to the else condition. Now value is 0. Value is basically the inner score. It will help to calculate the inner score for the string. Now stack.peak is a 0. It means that we got the empty parenthesis and value will be 0 only. So value is 0 means empty parenthesis. So push 1 to the stack and remove the 0 from the stack, which is the marker for the open bracket for this closing bracket. Remove the 0, push the score 1 for this empty parenthesis. Go to the next character, which is closing bracket. It will again go to the else. Now this time there is no 0 onto the stack.pick. It means there was some string before this closing bracket. There was some valid string before this closing bracket, and it is present between this closing bracket and its opening bracket. So what we do, we sum up all the values. Now value is 1. We remove that stack.pop, basically the open bracket for this closed bracket, and value is 1. Now 1 into 2. Why 2? Because it is inside the pair of parentheses. So the value will get doubled based on the rule 3. And we push that score. Now we go to the next character, which is again closing bracket. It will do the same thing here also. It will take all the values till it sees the opening bracket for this closing bracket, which is represented by 0. So value is 2. We pop the stack, which is the opening bracket for this closing bracket. Now value is 2. 2 into 2, 4. So we push the 4 to the stack. So it basically gave the score for this overall string. Now we completed the parsing. It will come out of this for loop, and we will sum up all the values in a stack. And these values are basically nothing but the score for valid parenthesis substrings, which are combined and which gives us the overall string. So which is 1 plus 4, 5. So we got the 5 as a result for this input string, and this is the implementation using a. So now the question is, can we solve this without using a stack? So let's say this is our input example. Now this string can be represented as a combination of this empty parenthesis plus this rest of the string. And we have highlighted the empty parenthesis here. We'll understand why. So the score for this first string is 1 and score for this rest of the string is 8, as we understood in a previous slide. And 8 plus 1 gives a 9 as a overall score for this complete string. Now observe one thing. Number of open brackets before this empty parenthesis string is 0. And the number of open brackets before this empty parenthesis strings, yellow and red, is 2. Right? Keep this in mind. Now score of each empty parenthesis gets double for every open bracket. As we saw in the previous slides, the score for this empty parenthesis, if it is inside the open bracket, for every open bracket, that score gets double. For example, for this first string, right, the number of open brackets before that is 0. Right? Here the number of open brackets is 0. So that's why the score remains 1. It does not get double. But for this, the second example, the number of open brackets before this yellow parenthesis and red empty parenthesis is 2. 1, 2. So the score gets double 2 times. So score of this gets double 1 into 2 into 2. 2 times we are multiplying by 2 because there are number of open brackets before then is 2. So it's 4. And score of this red one becomes like 1 into 2 into 2, 4. And because it is kind of a plus b, that's why 4 plus 4 is a 8. So overall score is a 8 for this overall string. So that is what we observe. The score of empty parenthesis gets double for every open bracket. So if you see, it comes down to some formula. So let's say the number of open brackets before this empty parenthesis is 0. So 2 raised to 0 is 1. So for this, we are getting the score 1 correctly. And here, the number of open brackets before each empty parenthesis is 2. So 2 raised to 2, because we are multiplying by 2 based on the number of open brackets before them, which is 2. 2 raised to 2 and 2 raised to 2. This is for this parenthesis and this is for this parenthesis. So 4 plus 4, 8. So you can see we are getting this value using some formula. The formula, which is basically comes down to that score equal to score plus how much this empty parenthesis is contributing based on the number of open brackets before it. So power of 2, number of open brackets minus 1. Why minus 1? Because the number of open brackets actually here are 3, but we don't consider this because we consider it as a empty parenthesis. So that's why number of open brackets is 3 minus 1, which is 2. So this formula we can use, and if we observe this formula, only thing we need to keep track of is the number of open brackets before when we see any empty parenthesis. So let's understand how we can implement this idea. Based on the points which we discussed in the previous slides, let's understand the implementation without using a stack. So we are maintaining a two variables here. One is score, which represents the overall score, and one is open brackets. So it is a counter which tracks the number of open brackets till now. And this Boolean flag, seen first closing bracket, it helps us to tell whether the first closing bracket which we are visiting, it helps us to tell whether we are visiting the empty parenthesis or not. And when we hit the empty parenthesis, then we need to see how that empty parenthesis is contributing to the overall score using the formula which we discussed in a previous slide. So let's start. So we are passing the overall string character by character. So we start with the open bracket. So for each open bracket, we are incrementing this counter, and we are making this flag as false because every open bracket basically says, or it's kind of a beginning of the new string, right? Because for every open bracket, there will be some closing bracket. Now we came here, open bracket is incremented, and when we see the closing bracket, is this the first closing bracket? It means, is this the bracket which represents the empty parenthesis? Yes, so make it as a true. And how can we see the score for this empty parenthesis which is contributing to the overall score? So open brackets is 3. So 3 minus 2 raised to 3 minus 1, which is 2 raised to 2. Why 1 minus? Because as I explained, we don't need to consider this one open bracket because it belongs to the empty parenthesis. So 2 raised to 2 is 4. So now new score is 4. Now we go to the next open bracket count we decremented because we removed this open bracket for this empty parenthesis. We still have 2 open brackets. We go to the next. Now open bracket becomes 3, and we make this seen first closing bracket as false because this new open bracket represents that there is a new string or new closing bracket will come. Now we go to the closing bracket. This is the first closing bracket which represents the empty parenthesis based on this flag which we are maintaining. Now see how this empty parenthesis is contributing to the overall score. How many open brackets are before this empty parenthesis? 2, which is basically open brackets minus 1 by removing this open bracket for empty parenthesis, which is 2. So 2 raised to 2 plus what is the existing score? It is 4. So 4 plus 4 is 8. So new score is 8. And we decrement the open brackets count. Now for this closing bracket, this is not the first closing bracket. Basically, this closing bracket does not indicate the empty parenthesis, right? We have already calculated the score contributed by each empty parenthesis based on the open brackets for this closing bracket. So we just need to continue parsing. And once we finish the parsing, we have this score as the final result, which is 8. So we saw that how we implemented the solution without using a stack by just maintaining the open brackets counter. Because we just need to calculate the score. We don't need to keep track of for which closing bracket, which is the open bracket. Because we know that it is already a valid parenthesis string. So we don't need to monitor each and every open bracket. We just need to monitor the counter for the open bracket. So this is the Java implementation for the solution which we understood just now in a detail. And this is the solution which we implemented without using a stack. And here we are parsing the string only once. So let's say if there are n number of characters in a string, so the time complexity will be O of n. So we can see this is the optimal solution, and we are not using the extra space also like a stack. So let's submit it. So you can see this is submitted successfully. Hope you understood the explanation about the problem statement and how we approach to the solution and why we decided to use the stack data structure, and based on what property we decided that it can be solved without using the stack data structure as well, with O of n time complexity and without using any extra space like stack. If you like the video, please share and subscribe. Thank you so much.